Some courtrooms feel heavy before anyone speaks. That morning, it felt ordinary. Routine sentencing docket. Minor assault charge. Defendant, Marcus Hale. Age, 38. No prior violent convictions. Judge Amelia Carter adjusted her glasses and skimmed the file without emotion. Assault during a bar altercation. Victim suffered a concussion. Defendant claims self-defense, standard, predictable, procedural. Bring him forward. The side door opened. Marcus Hale stepped in. Broad shoulders, worn jacket, hands cuffed in front. Not aggressive, not nervous, just steady. He stepped to the podium and lifted his eyes, and that was when her breath stopped. Not visibly, not dramatically, but internally. Everything went silent. Because she knew that face. Not from a file, not from another case, from rain, from broken glass, from headlights spinning across wet pavement, from the worst night of her life, 7 years earlier. She blinked once, professional mask intact, but her pulse was no longer steady. The prosecutor began. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with aggravated assault. She didn't hear the rest, because memory doesn't ask permission. It floods. 7 years ago, a late November storm. She was not a judge yet. She was a prosecutor then. Driving home after a 12-hour day, phone buzzing with unanswered messages, windshield barely clearing under heavy rain. A truck ran a red light. She remembered the impact more than the sound. Metal folding, glass exploding, airbags punching breath from her lungs. Then, darkness. And then, fire. Not cinematic flames. Small, growing, spreading under the hood. She remembered being trapped, seatbelt jammed, door crushed, leg pinned. She remembered panic. She remembered smoke filling the cabin. And then, she remembered a stranger's voice. Stay with me? Calm, firm, close, hands pulling at the door, someone kicking at the windshield. Rain pouring in, cold air rushing over her face. Don't close your eyes, the voice ordered. She didn't. She couldn't, because the voice wouldn't let her. He broke the glass, reached in, cut the seatbelt, pulled her free seconds before the engine ignited fully. She remembered lying on the pavement, rain hitting her face, siren lights reflecting in puddles. She remembered trying to say thank you. But he was already stepping back, already disappearing. No name, no number, no recognition. Just gone. Back in the present courtroom, Marcus Hale stood 10 feet in front of her, older, bearded now, more tired. But it was him, the eyes, the voice. She could almost hear it again. Stay with me. The prosecutor paused. Your Honor? The room waited. Judge Amelia Carter realized she had been silent too long. She straightened slightly. Yes, proceed. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. The defense attorney spoke next. My client acted in defense after being struck first. Marcus didn't look at her like a criminal. He looked like he always had, grounded, alert, aware. She studied the file again. Construction foreman. No violent record. Community volunteer. Single father. The alleged victim? 3 prior assault charges. The judge's mind was racing. The man who pulled her from a burning car now stood in front of her in handcuffs, charged, vulnerable, and unaware because he didn't recognize her. Of course he didn't. That night had been chaos, blood, rain, sirens. She had been barely conscious, but she recognized him instantly. The scar above his right eyebrow from that same night. He had cut himself on her shattered windshield while pulling her out. She remembered the blood running down his face. He hadn't cared. He just kept saying, "Stay with me." The courtroom murmured as the prosecutor outlined injuries. She forced herself back into focus. Judges do not carry personal debt into sentencing. Judges do not allow gratitude to influence law. Judges are not supposed to remember being human. But she did. and the weight of that memory pressed against her ribs. "Mr. Hale," she said finally. His head lifted slightly. "Yes, ma'am." His voice. It was the same, controlled, calm, grounded. Her pulse spiked. "Have we met before?" she asked. The courtroom stiffened. Defense attorney looked confused. Marcus blinked. "I don't believe so, Your Honor." He studied her face. No recognition. Of course not. She had been bleeding, unconscious, half burned. The prosecutor stepped in carefully. "Your Honor, is there a concern?" Concern. That word again. She leaned back, mind calculating ethics. Judicial Conduct Code. Recuse if impartiality can reasonably be questioned. Could it? Yes, absolutely, yes. But stepping down would expose something, publicly. The story, the accident, the rescue. And he clearly didn't want recognition. He had left that night without waiting for praise. He didn't even know who she became. He had saved a stranger, not a future judge. Her heart beat louder. And then Marcus spoke again, softly. "You look familiar, though." The room went still. Her breath caught. He tilted his head slightly. "Were you in an accident years ago, near 9th and Crescent?" The courtroom air shifted completely. The prosecutor looked between them. Defense attorney stiffened. Judge Amelia Carter felt the room narrowing. "Yes," she said quietly. "I was." Marcus nodded slowly. His eyes widened just slightly. You're the woman from the blue sedan." Not a question. Recognition dawning. She swallowed. "Yes." The silence that followed was not procedural. It was seismic. Because suddenly, this was no longer just a case. It was history. And history changes power. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then said something no one in that courtroom expected. "I was hoping it was you." The defense attorney whispered, "Marcus," but he didn't stop. "I never got to check if you were okay." The judge's composure cracked for half a second. 7 years of professionalism, undone by one sentence. The prosecutor rose quickly. "Your Honor, if there is prior personal involvement," but she couldn't hear him, because all she could hear was rain. Glass. And that voice again. "Stay with me." The bailiff shifted. The gallery whispered. The courtroom was no longer neutral, and every person in that room understood whatever happened next would not be ordinary. Judge Amelia Carter placed her hands flat on the bench, steadying herself, because she now had to make a decision, one that would define her integrity, recuse or remain. And if she remained, would justice be law or loyalty? The silence did not break gently. It cracked. The prosecutor cleared his throat first. "Your Honor, in light of this revelation, the state respectfully requests reassignment. Respectfully. Strategically." The word echoed through the courtroom like a formal accusation. Judge Amelia Carter did not look at him. Her eyes were still on Marcus Hale, the man who pulled her from twisted metal, the man who never waited for applause, the man now standing in handcuffs. "Mr. Hale," she said carefully, voice level again, "you may not address the court further at this time." Her tone had shifted back to procedural steel, but internally, nothing was steady. Marcus nodded once. "Understood, Your Honor." He didn't smile, didn't plead, didn't use the moment for sympathy, and that restraint made everything heavier. The prosecutor stepped forward. "This creates an unavoidable conflict of interest. The court's impartiality could reasonably be questioned." He was correct, ethically, legally, publicly. The defense attorney hesitated before speaking. "Your Honor, the defense has no objection to your continued oversight." Marcus glanced sideways at her. Surprised, she whispered, barely audible, "You want this judge?" He didn't answer, but his eyes returned to Amelia. Judge Carter inhaled slowly. 7 years ago, she had been powerless, trapped, bleeding, dependent on a stranger's courage. Now she held authority. The power dynamic had reversed completely. And that reversal is dangerous, because gratitude is not neutral. She folded her hands. This court will take a brief recess to consider recusal. The gavel struck, soft, deliberate. The room erupted into whispers. Marcus was led back toward the holding door. He paused, looked at her once more, not asking for help, not expecting mercy, just looking, as if confirming she had survived. Inside chambers, Amelia closed the door slowly. The silence there felt different, thicker, private. She removed her robe and placed it carefully over the chair. 7 years. She had built a career on restraint, on distance, on unemotional clarity. And now, the man who saved her life stood accused in her courtroom. If she recused herself, the case would move to another judge, clean, procedural, safe, no questions asked. If she remained, every ruling would be examined, every expression dissected, every sentence scrutinized for bias. She walked to the window, looked out over the city skyline. Rain clouds were forming. Strange. She hadn't thought about that night in years. She had buried it, filed it under gratitude, moved on. But now, the past had walked back in wearing handcuffs. A knock at the chamber door. Her clerk. "Judge? Media's already calling." Of course they were. The bailiff must have mentioned the exchange, or someone in the gallery recognized the tension. Stories move faster than facts. "Hold them off," she said. "Yes, Judge." The clerk hesitated. "Are you stepping down?" Amelia didn't answer immediately, because the truth was uncomfortable. If Marcus were guilty, she could sentence him harshly to prove neutrality. If Marcus were innocent, she could dismiss too quickly and invite suspicion. Either direction could look contaminated. The only clean option was recusal. But recusal felt like abandonment. He hadn't walked away from her that night. He had stepped toward danger. And now she was considering stepping away from his. She closed her eyes briefly. Judges are not allowed to carry debt. But she carried one, not financial, not legal, human. She returned to the bench. The courtroom quieted immediately. Marcus was brought back in. She looked at him longer this time, searching for manipulation, for expectation, for subtle plea. She found none. He stood exactly as before, grounded, present, unafraid. "Mr. Hale," she began carefully, "you understand that my prior interaction with you presents potential grounds for recusal." "Yes, Your Honor." His voice remained steady. "Do you request reassignment?" The prosecutor interjected quickly. "The state does." She held up a hand. "I asked the defendant." Marcus considered the question seriously. The room leaned forward. "No," he said. The word was simple, clear. No theatrics. The prosecutor stiffened. "Your Honor." She ignored him. "Why not?" she asked Marcus. He hesitated for the first time, not long, but enough to show thought. "Because you know what kind of person I am." The courtroom shifted, not emotionally, structurally. That sentence implied something profound. She studied him. "And what kind is that?" "The kind who steps in," he replied. Not defensive, not proud, just factual. 7 years collapsed again. Rain, glass, fire. Stay with me. She felt something tighten in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "Mr. Hale, this court does not operate on character references." "I know," he said softly. "Then why say that?" His eyes didn't leave hers. "Because you saw me when I didn't think anyone important would." The defense attorney whispered urgently, "Marcus!" But he continued, "And you told me I wasn't the mistake I made." The room went silent again. The prosecutor's pen stopped moving. Amelia's pulse shifted. He remembered. Not just the accident, the words. He had stood in her courtroom years before, young, angry, lost, and she had spoken to him differently. She hadn't realized how deeply it landed. "You remember that?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Yes," he swallowed. "It's why I stayed." The prosecutor stepped forward sharply. "Your Honor, this is becoming personal." It already was. She turned to the prosecutor. "This court will determine its own boundaries." Her tone cut clean, then back to Marcus. "Stayed where?" "In the city," he answered. "I almost left after that charge. Thought I'd messed everything up." A pause. "But you said the next choice mattered more." The room felt smaller. "In this case?" she asked. His jaw tightened slightly. "I made a choice." "Which was?" "To protect someone who couldn't protect themselves." The prosecutor exhaled sharply. "We are not retrying a different case." But the weight of that statement lingered. Protect someone. It echoed dangerously close to self-defense, to necessity, to motive beyond aggression. Amelia leaned back slowly. If she stepped down now, another judge would hear only the charge, not the history, not the character, not the man who ran toward a burning vehicle. And judges are supposed to ignore character beyond evidence. But character informs credibility, and credibility shapes truth. She folded her hands again, calm, measured. "This court will not recuse." The prosecutor objected immediately. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "It is within discretion," she replied, "and I am confident in my ability to remain impartial." The room reacted quietly. Marcus did not smile. He simply nodded once, not in victory, in acknowledgement. She continued. "However, the record will reflect full disclosure of prior interaction. Any party may raise objection through formal appeal. Procedural shield, constructed carefully." The prosecutor sat down stiffly. The defense attorney exhaled slowly. The gavel struck again. "We proceed." But the energy had changed permanently. This was no longer a simple assault case. It was a test of law, of integrity, of whether gratitude corrupts justice or clarifies it. And somewhere deep inside, Amelia knew something else. If Marcus had truly acted in defense, if he had stepped in to protect someone weaker, then history wasn't repeating. It was consistent. And that consistency would be the hardest thing to ignore. The courtroom didn't breathe normally anymore. It inhaled carefully, as if one wrong movement might fracture something delicate. The prosecutor adjusted his tie before approaching the bench again. "If the court insists on proceeding, the state requests immediate testimony from the alleged victim." Granted. The side door opened. Jason Laird stepped forward. 32. Expensive suit. Bruise faintly yellowing along his temple. He did not look fragile. He looked irritated. He took the oath with visible impatience. The prosecutor began. "Mr. Laird, describe what happened the night of the incident." Laird cleared his throat. "I was at Ridgeway Bar. I was having a private conversation. The defendant interfered." "Interfered how?" "He shoved me, unprovoked." The prosecutor nodded. "And the result?" "I hit the floor. I suffered a concussion." The defense attorney stood. "Mr. Laird, were you speaking with someone prior to the alleged shove?" "Yes." "Who?" "A friend." "Name?" He hesitated. "Is that relevant?" The judge intervened calmly. "Answer the question." He shifted. "Emily Torres." The name hit Marcus like a silent pulse, but he did not move. The defense continued. Was Ms. Torres attempting to leave the conversation? Objection, leading, overruled. Laird's jaw tightened. She was emotional. Emotional how? She'd been drinking. The defense stepped closer. Was she asking you to stop? Laird's silence lasted too long. The courtroom felt it. Answer, the judge said evenly. She said I was embarrassing her. Embarrassing how? The prosecutor objected again. Sustained. The defense shifted angle. Did Ms. Torres ask you to let go of her arm? The room tightened. Laird's composure cracked slightly. She was overreacting. That wasn't the question. His eyes flicked toward Marcus, then back. Yes. Did you let go? No. The silence this time was heavy, not dramatic, just clear. Marcus finally spoke quietly. She asked 3 times. The prosecutor snapped, "The defendant will remain silent." But the judge's gaze was fixed on Laird now. "Mr. Laird, did you physically restrain Miss Torres?" "I held her arm." "For how long?" "Until he shoved me." Marcus's attorney didn't hesitate. "So, Mr. Mercer intervened after observing you holding a woman against her will?" Laird's face flushed. He didn't know the situation. The defense's voice sharpened slightly. "Did she ask for help?" A long pause. "Yes." The word echoed. Marcus's jaw tightened subtly. The judge felt it too. 7 years ago, he had stepped toward danger without knowing her story, without context, just instinct. Now, he had done it again. The prosecutor tried to regain ground. Even if intervention was warranted, physical force causing injury exceeds necessity. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Laird, were you intoxicated?" "Yes." "Were you physically larger than Miss Torres?" "Yes." "Did you release her immediately after Mr. Mercer intervened?" "No." The courtroom absorbed it slowly. Like water through cloth, the defense delivered the pivot. Mr. Mercer acted to stop unwanted physical contact. The prosecutor countered. "He escalated force." Marcus finally spoke again. "I pushed him once." "Hard enough to cause a concussion," the prosecutor snapped. Marcus met his gaze. "He slipped." The prosecutor scoffed. "Convenient." The judge's voice cut through. "Enough." The room stilled instantly. She turned to Laird. "Did you strike Mr. Mercer before or after the shove?" Laird hesitated. "After." "So he did not strike you first?" "No." The judge nodded slowly. Her mind wasn't in the bar anymore. It was back in the rain, smoke, seatbelt jammed. She remembered the first time he touched her, not gently, forcefully, because gentleness would have cost time. He had grabbed her arm, pulled hard, left bruises, bruises that saved her life. Now another bruise sat on this man's temple. Context defines force. She knew that intimately. "Call Miss Torres," she said. The courtroom stirred. Emily Torres stepped forward, mid-20s, nervous, eyes red-rimmed. She took the oath softly. The defense approached carefully. "Miss Torres, did you ask Mr. Laird to let go of you?" "Yes." "More than once?" "Yes." "Did you feel threatened?" She swallowed. "Yes." "Did you ask Mr. Mercer for help?" Her eyes flicked to Marcus briefly. "Yes." "What did he do?" "He told Jason to let go." "And then?" "When Jason didn't, Marcus pushed him." The prosecutor stepped in. "Did you instruct Mr. Mercer to use force?" "No." "But I was scared." The room held that word. Scared. Judge Amelia Carter watched Marcus closely. There was no pride in him, no performative heroism, just consistency. He stepped in. Again. The prosecutor's voice hardened. "Mr. Mercer has a history of inserting himself." The judge's gaze sharpened. "Clarify." 7 years ago, vandalism tied to a federal protest. Ah, there it was, the shadow. Marcus didn't flinch. The prosecutor continued. Patterned behavior, reactionary intervention. The defense countered immediately, or consistent defense of others. The tension in the room felt surgical now, precise. The judge turned to Marcus. Why didn't you walk away? The question wasn't procedural. It was personal. Marcus answered simply, because she asked. Silence. Absolute. The judge's pulse slowed. 7 years ago, she hadn't asked. She hadn't been able to. He had acted anyway. Now, he had acted because someone did ask. Pattern behavior? Yes, but not violent. Protective. The prosecutor made one last attempt. Your Honor, even if motive was protective, the law requires proportionality. The judge nodded once. Correct. She folded her hands slowly. The court will recess for review. The gavel struck, but no one spoke as she exited. Inside chambers, she stood still for several seconds. He hadn't changed. He had refined, from impulsive protester to deliberate protector, from breaking glass to drawing lines. And now, she had to decide whether force used to stop force becomes crime. Her decision would not just judge him, it would judge consistency. Because if she punished him now, she would be punishing the very instinct that saved her life. And that would not be law. That would be avoidance. She returned to the bench. The courtroom rose. She looked at Marcus, then at Laird, then at Emily, then at the prosecutor. This court finds that Mr. Mercer's use of force was proportional to the immediate threat presented. A breath. He acted in defense of another. Gasps. The prosecutor stood immediately. Your Honor, she continued, the charge of aggravated assault is dismissed. The words landed clean, precise, final. The courtroom exhaled. Emily covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Marcus didn't move. He just watched her. She met his gaze, not as debtor, not as savior, as judge. The gavel struck once more. Case dismissed. But the silence afterward felt deeper than relief, because justice is cleanest when it aligns with truth. And truth had been consistent. He stepped in, again and again, and this time, the law recognized it. The gavel's echo didn't fade quickly. It lingered, because dismissal does not erase tension. It exposes it. Jason Laird stood frozen for a moment after the ruling. Disbelief first, then anger. This is ridiculous, he muttered under his breath. The prosecutor leaned toward him immediately. Not here! But the damage was already done. The gallery had heard it. Emily Torres hadn't moved. She was staring at Marcus, not romantically, not dramatically, just relieved, as if something had been restored. Marcus finally exhaled, a breath he had been holding since the charge was read weeks ago. But he did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply nodded once toward the judge, a quiet acknowledgement. She didn't return it, not publicly. Her posture remained exact, controlled, professional. Court is adjourned. The room began to disperse. But energy doesn't disperse evenly. It travels. And this case was already traveling. A local reporter pushed through the hallway outside. Judge Carter dismissed on self-defense grounds after prior personal connection was disclosed. The story was forming before anyone left the building. Inside chambers, Amelia removed her robe slowly. Her hands were steady now, but her thoughts were not. She replayed her reasoning carefully. Proportional force, immediate threat, defense of another. The law supported her ruling. Cleanly. Yet she knew what would be whispered. She saved the man who saved her. Bias, favor, debt repaid. Narratives are easier than nuance. A knock at the chamber door. Her clerk again. Media is asking if your prior relationship influenced the decision. Relationship. Such a loaded word. There was no relationship, Amelia replied calmly. Documented rescue 7 years prior. The clerk nodded. Will you comment? No. She sat down slowly. Because public explanation often weakens judicial authority. And authority, once explained too often, begins to look defensive. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, Marcus stepped into open air for the first time without cuffs. Emily followed him. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "Yes, I did." He didn't look back at the building immediately. Not until she asked, "Did you know she'd be the judge?" "No." "But you recognized her?" He nodded. "For a second. Why didn't you say anything earlier?" He considered the question. "Because it didn't matter." Emily frowned slightly. "It did today." He shook his head gently. "No, the law mattered." That was the difference. He hadn't expected rescue in return. He hadn't leveraged history. He hadn't mentioned the accident first. She had. Inside the courthouse, the prosecutor sat in his office reviewing the ruling. He didn't dispute the logic. He disputed the optics. He knew appeals were possible, but appeals require legal error, and the judge had left none. The record was clean, which frustrated him more. Across town, Jason Laird's version of events was already shifting in private conversations. She sided with him because he saved her. People prefer simple motives. Complicated integrity rarely trends. Back in chambers, Amelia stared at her reflection in the dark window. She remembered lying on cold pavement, rain hitting her face, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to keep her conscious. He had not asked who she was. He had not calculated benefit. He had acted, purely, instinctively. Today she had ruled, not for him, but for consistency. He stepped in when someone was vulnerable, again and again. Pattern matters, in law, in character. And she could not ignore that pattern simply to appear distant. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring once, twice, then answered. "This is Judge Carter." A pause, a measured voice. "Judge, this is Deputy Director Halverson. Federal." Her tone did not shift. "Yes. We trust today's ruling was made within full awareness of its implications." There it was, not threat. Pressure, polite, structured. "It was made within the law," she replied evenly. Silence on the other end. Then, "We will review. I encourage it." The call ended. She set the phone down slowly. Power doesn't shout. It signals. Review. Reassignment, audit, quiet consequences. But she had not ruled emotionally. She had ruled legally, and that distinction would protect her. Later that evening, a small envelope arrived at her home. No return address. Inside, a photograph, 7 years old, taken by a bystander the night of the accident, rain streaking across the frame, Marcus kneeling beside her wrecked car, hands on the twisted door, fire just beginning under the hood. She had never seen the image before. On the back, a single sentence written in black ink. "You told me I wasn't the mistake I made." Her chest tightened. He hadn't sent it for leverage. He had sent it for closure, to remind her, or maybe himself. That identity is not defined by a single moment. Not vandalism, not accusation, not dismissal. She placed the photo in her desk drawer, not hidden, not displayed, just preserved, because memory is not bias, memory is context. And context had guided her, but outside, narratives were still forming, and one in particular was gaining momentum. If a judge can rule on the case of the man who saved her life, what else can influence the bench? Talk radio was already debating. Legal blogs were dissecting. A petition was quietly circulating online calling for judicial transparency review. Marcus didn't know any of that yet. He was home, sitting at his kitchen table, staring at the wall, because freedom after accusation is not celebratory. It's quiet. His daughter, 8 years old, ran into the room. "Daddy, are you in trouble anymore?" He smiled faintly. "No." She wrapped her arms around him, and in that moment, he understood something deeper. 7 years ago, he had saved a stranger. Today, he had defended another. Not because he was reckless, but because he could not ignore a moment where someone needed him. And that consistency is what the law recognized. The real test, however, was just beginning. Because integrity, once visible, attracts scrutiny. And scrutiny tests whether your line was drawn for truth or convenience. Scrutiny does not arrive with sirens. It arrives in letters, in quiet reviews, in headlines framed as questions. 2 weeks after the dismissal, a formal inquiry was announced. Not an accusation, not a charge, an ethics review. Standard procedure when potential conflicts are disclosed. The phrasing was calm, but everyone understood what it meant. Judge Amelia Carter was now under examination, not for misconduct, for proximity, for history, for gratitude. The media loved the symmetry. Judge Free's man who saved her life. The headlines spread faster than the ruling transcript. Marcus saw it first on his phone. He stared at the screen longer than he expected to. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't used the accident in his defense. He hadn't mentioned it first. She had, because truth demanded disclosure. Now, truth was costing her. He closed the article slowly. His daughter was in the next room doing homework. He felt something twist in his chest. 7 years ago, he didn't think about consequences. He saw fire. He acted. Now he saw headlines. And he understood something different. Sometimes the person you save ends up standing in fire later, and you don't get to pull them out. Inside the courthouse, Amelia sat before a review panel. 3 senior judges, measured faces, controlled tones. Judge Carter, one began, did you believe your prior interaction impaired your impartiality? No. Did it influence your ruling? No. Were you aware public perception might question the decision? Yes. Then why not recuse? The question landed gently, but it carried weight. She answered without hesitation. Because recusal would suggest that gratitude overrides law. A pause. I ruled on evidence. Another judge leaned forward slightly. Would you have ruled differently if the defendant were a stranger? She held the gaze evenly. No. Silence followed, longer than comfortable. One of them nodded faintly. The record reflects clean reasoning. That mattered. Not headlines. Not narratives. The record. Outside, commentary continued. Some called her courageous, others called her compromised. But noise fades faster than precedent. Within a month, the review concluded. No ethical violation, no disciplinary action. The ruling stood, quietly, legally, solid. The headlines moved on. They always do. Marcus requested one final meeting. Not in chambers, not formal. He waited near the courthouse steps after hours. She noticed him immediately when she exited. No robe, no bench between them. Just 2 people on opposite sides of history. You shouldn't have, he said before she could speak. Shouldn't have what? She asked calmly. Stayed. Her expression didn't change. I didn't stay for you. He knew that. I know. A pause. But it still cost you. She looked at him for a long moment. No, she said quietly. It cost the illusion. He frowned slightly. Of what? That justice is sterile. The word hung in the air. Judges are human, she continued. The question isn't whether we feel. It's whether we can separate feeling from reasoning. And you could? He asked. Yes. He searched her face for doubt, for strain. He found none, just steadiness. Then I'm glad it was you, he said finally. She studied him carefully. Why? Because if it wasn't, he replied, I would have wondered if the law saw the whole picture. There it was. The reason he didn't request reassignment. Not advantage, clarity. She nodded slowly. You stepped in again, she said. He shrugged slightly. She asked. That simple, always that simple. You realize, she added, one day that instinct may not end cleanly. He held her gaze. I know. And you'll still step in? Yes. No hesitation, no bravado, just truth. She felt something settle inside her, not debt, not gratitude, alignment. 7 years ago, he ran toward danger without knowing who she was. Today, he stood firm without knowing how she would rule. Consistency defines character, and character, when consistent, simplifies judgment. She extended her hand, not as judge, as person. He shook it once, firm, brief, complete. No more rescues, she said softly. He allowed a faint smile. No promises. They parted without ceremony, without audience, without headline. Months later, a new case came before her. Another bar altercation, another claim of self-defense, different faces, different names, but the same question beneath it. When does stepping in become stepping over? She ruled carefully, based on facts, as always, because the law does not remember faces, but judges do, and memory, when disciplined, becomes wisdom. Marcus returned fully to his life, work, parenthood, routine, but something subtle had shifted in him. Not pride, not recognition, just confirmation. That stepping in does not always destroy you. Sometimes it affirms you, even when it costs, even when it risks. Years later, a law student asked Judge Carter during a lecture, "Have you ever ruled in a case where your personal history intersected?" She paused, then answered carefully, "Yes." "And how did you stay objective?" She smiled slightly. "By remembering that gratitude is a feeling. Justice is a standard." The room wrote that down, but only she understood the weight behind it. And somewhere across the city, Marcus Hale was teaching his daughter something similar. "You don't ignore someone who needs help," he told her one night, "even if it complicates things." "Why?" she asked. He thought about rain, fire, a courtroom, and a judge who refused to step away. "Because that's who we are," he said. "Not heroes, not saviors, just people who step in." The story never became a legend. It became a quiet precedent, a reminder that integrity is not proven in easy cases. It is revealed when the past walks into the room, and you still choose the law.